Hey, thanks for tuning in for another episode of the ReMinders podcast. In the background, you're hearing my Christmas-ish song, facetiously telling the story of the Santa Claus origin, wherein yellow snow crystals play a prominent part in perceiving the fantastic voyages of reindeer and gifts from the earth. I'll let you dive into that story on your own time if interested. The song's called Gifts of Awakening. We've got a long episode ahead of us today, so I'm gonna try to keep this intro short. Welcoming on my friend Joe Haas. He's telling a little bit of his story arc of his journey through spirituality, essentially. He was heavy into the Christian religion, maybe this time last year, something like that, and talks about his growth in and out of that modality. We talk about Neville Goddard and a bunch of other stuff. Like I said, it's a long episode, so I'm just going to start us with a brief grounding meditation and then dive into the conversation with Joe. I edited out the beginning of our conversation. We're talking about music and essentially what makes or breaks certain musicians' careers. And we were talking about the element of just being in the right time and right space for certain artists to get that breakthrough moment. And that's where the conversation will start after this brief meditation. All right, thank you for listening. All right, let's just take a moment to come back to the center of self. You can close your eyes if you like. It's coming back to noticing our natural patterns of breathing, not influencing it in any way, unless you feel inspired to maybe take a little bit of a deeper breath. Just noticing what is already present. These subconscious activities that are keeping us alive without us even having to think about it. Can bring some gratitude into that simplicity, a little simple truth. Keeping the flow flowing. I don't personally really relate to the word luck, but I know what you're saying, that like that mysterious factor that you
randomness in your favor. I don't know what you want.
I don't believe in randomness either, man.
At all?
Not really. I think that it's just our limited perspective. You know, I think the idea of seeing things as random or luck is just our inability to fathom the quantum realm. You know, like if you think about the way that molecules are dancing, even like rolling dice or picking a card out of a deck, you know, like there's this idea that it's random, but like nothing's random. Everything is exactly where it is, not where it needs to be, but just everything is where it is. Mm-hmm. So like we're not always tuned into the order behind things. But I don't really think that anything is random or truly chaotic. I think it's just our perspective is unable to hold the vastness of understanding.
That's interesting.
The non-random nature, the perfect nature of nature,
reality,
truth.
Yeah.
You know.
But,
yeah.
That's interesting.
I don't have that many words to back up my claim, but you know, that's how I feel about it.
That's where, like, that's something I'm struggling with currently. It's like, you know, coming from kind of that Christian viewpoint with God and everything, and that there's a purpose to everything. It's like, man, but what is the purpose for catastrophe? Like, what is the reason behind it?
Mm-hmm.
And then, I don't know, it's challenge, man. Because it's like, on one hand, I've studied enough psychology, I can totally understand why people behave the way they do.
Yeah.
Based on their history. The more I get to know about their history, the more I understand and can actually reasonably predict their future actions, which can be terrifying to people. But at the same time, like, people can surprise you out of the blue, and you never know. You never see it coming.
There's always that mysterious factor. But I'll take a whack at you're posing that question of why does catastrophe happen, or what's the reason on a maybe spiritual level of that.
Yeah.
I was just talking to a friend about this yesterday. You know, the idea of just awkward things happening and being like, oh my God, why did that happen? That was so embarrassing. Or to your point, worse than embarrassing, like catastrophic, you know, like tragic. Why do we experience trauma as humans? You know, that seems to be a factor that none of us can escape. And I think there's probably like a timeless parental desire to shield the next generation from trauma, you know, to try to have the next generation avoid all of the pitfalls that we've found ourselves in, or the trauma that we faced. And it doesn't seem like we're ever able to do that.
No,
you know, because it seems that part of being human is being conditioned by our trauma and by the collective, the collective paradigm. But I feel from a higher perspective, looking down, that the reason why we have to go through those shadow periods is as a catalyst for our growth. You know, even trauma, you know, there's like a comedy bit. I don't remember the whole thing, but the gist of it was, you know, something about, oh, you know, blah, blah, blah. I thought I was a real cool person. Then I come to find out that my entire personality is just a like trauma response. You know, and that's so true. I mean, our personalities are absolutely molded by our experiences in early childhood, which, you know, are either supporting the natural creativity, curiosity, desire for freedom, but need for safety, you know, all these, the paradigm of being a child, being a newborn, and, you know, a new vessel in this grand society of expectations and all of the energy that dances in society.
Yeah.
And so those early experiences are either in support of those natural needs and inclinations, or in some way challenge those, right? And both of which mold our personality, you know, in the ways that we were supported, that results in us having certain trust or expectation that our needs will be met, you know. And then the reverse is true too. Our traumas put in a seed of expectation that we expect things not to work out in this particular domain that I experienced the trauma within, you know. Do you feel that? Does that check out for your experience?
So let me try and summarize.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're saying that on the path towards spiritual enlightenment or growth, or just becoming fully, you can even say maximally or fully human, trauma's an inevitable thing, since it's a gateway to break down identification.
Yeah, that's that.
Is that right?
That pretty much. Yeah, that's pretty much the gist of it. I wasn't even necessarily speaking in terms of spiritual enlightenment yet. But yes. But yeah, I was mostly just painting the picture of what it means to be human.
Gotcha.
Literally, you know, just the basic. We're all conditioned by our experiences in early childhood, in positive ways and in negative ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
that's
the negative, okay, go ahead.
That's where I think sometimes, though, like, I think it can be less traumatic or less purposeful if you're not going somewhere. Like, there's a lot of people who aren't really going anywhere.
It seems that way.
And it's not that it's a bad thing.
Yeah.
And I have no judgments about it, but, like, if you're content and you're just cruising in a straight line, you're not trying to go, you're not seeking, you're not going anywhere, you're not looking for anything, like, if something happens, it just happens. It's like, it's not, if someone doesn't learn from the experience, then it seems random and needless. You know what I mean?
I do.
If that makes sense.
That does make sense.
But then again, we're getting back to like contextualization and perception. And
exactly. Yeah, that's why I use.
So
the
for
word.
one person, it could be a growth opportunity, and another
right.
person, it could just be this random BS that's popped up,
and we also
then they go back to baseline or whatever.
Sure. We also don't know what's happening inside of another person.
Right.
We don't know, what, and that's why I use the word "it seems that way" or the phrase "it seems that way." It seems that a lot of people aren't committed to growth.
Yeah.
Or
it does seem that way.
It does seem that way.
From what I've observed.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's our observations.
It's our observations.
It might not be true.
Check this out. Look at my life. In a lot of ways, it seems like I don't care about growth too. But on the inside, I obviously do. So there's so many factors to this. There's, just your circumstance of literally where is your psyche at? How has it developed? In what context are you in right now? Does that context and environment encourage growth, or is it suppressing it?
Yeah.
And are we going to make the action to change that? Are we going to take enough time to reflect and be real with ourselves to even acknowledge that we're in a stagnant space? And you can't see that.
There's no physical, there are, but that's like, there's no immediate physical manifestation of reflection and like introspection.
You're not going to get a notification on your phone that you're stagnant. You need to, change your life up a
check for 20 grand isn't going to pop up because you finally realize something about yourself.
Right, exactly.
And
but
then,
I will say, go ahead.
Oh, you're good.
I was just going to say that there are indications, though. Mental health,
absolutely.
For instance, I think is I like to put it this way. I think that mental illness, in quotes, symptoms are, I like to use the metaphor of like a blinking check engine light on your dashboard in your car.
Yes.
So if I'm feeling depressed, that's the blinking light. And I think that unfortunately, in the growing pains of society, and that, we used to not even acknowledge the blinking light at all on a societal level. Now we are, but it almost seems that the superficial way of doing it, which I unfortunately see a lot, is our approach is basically like, how do I turn off that light?
Yeah.
Rather than
what's it pointing to?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like, what's the issue?
You know what's interesting? I've looked a lot at trauma research, and there's a couple of big names that are good if anyone wanted to get into trauma research. Alice Miller is huge, from the 70s.
Okay.
She wrote about childhood trauma and its impact. She wrote about like literally so many things are forms of depression. Like grandiosity is a form of depression. It's like you don't feel comfortable just being yourself, and you feel like you have to do more to get
so insecurity.
Attention. It comes from childhood. It's like if your parents neglected to give you attention, then you felt like you had to act out or do more, or like get all A's to like get love or something. It's really interesting. And another guy who's still alive, modern, awesome dude, is Gabor Mate.
Oh, okay.
So
I've heard of him.
Yeah, he's done tons of investigation on trauma and research into that. And he even talks about how like practice for medicine is way behind the research. Scientific research is super far. It's way more ahead than every day what we deal with.
Absolutely.
The practice of stuff is like 50 years in the past from where the research is.
Yeah.
So he was saying a lot of research has come out that not just mental problems stem from trauma, but physical problems.
Oh, yep.
So like even arthritis and inflammation in the body, as a child, it may have served you. Like if you got hit or something or whatever happened, something might have happened. And they've even linked certain diseases to personalities, where your personality can show, and we know personality's fluid. Like it can change. You can if you wish, you can change how you behave and how you interact in the world.
Absolutely.
It's not easy necessarily, but you can do it. And like, you know.
Totally. And this might be a dumb example, but I mean, I think an easy example is like, think about someone that smokes cigarettes. Easy correlation between, you know, the type of person that would get attached to cigarettes and the type of person that may end up with lung cancer or something like that, or some sort of you know,
correlations and
respiratory malfunctioning or
and then
lack of health.
If you go a step further, which most practitioners don't do this, if you look at why were they drawn to cigarettes?
Right.
Why?
Because there are people
they were
that,
super stressed. This is hypothetical, but like, they're stressed the hell out. And when they smoke a cigarette, it makes them feel a little bit more in control of their life.
I'd be willing
You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then it's like, okay, what's the biggest issue? Is it the tobacco itself? Is it the stress? Or is it the combination of the two?
As well as the third factor of what associations do we have with this stimulus, whether it's tobacco or chocolate cake,
Or alcohol,
or
man.
alcohol,
God,
or whatever. What are your
the
social
most dangerous
associations?
drug on earth?
Sure, yeah.
But the most, like, it's also been
The
linked
most
to the most
socially
liberating.
associated, yeah.
Most socially lubricating. Like, it's crazy. And
Yeah. So back to real quick back to the example of smoking cigarettes. I would be willing to bet that a massive majority of people that are addicted to cigarettes, either their parent or someone that they were really close to, probably smoked.
yeah,
They probably have an emotional association or attachment to almost feeling like every time you smoke, you're connecting with your mom or your dad or your cousin or whatever.
or even if it's not
Your
someone
friends that
close, even if like there's an idol you have.
There's
like,
a lot of that
like Dave
programming in there
Chappelle
too.
smokes cigarettes. Maybe you like
He
Dave
makes it look
Chappelle a
cool.
lot. Yeah, he does.
Yeah, I mean,
And so that's how they marketed cigarettes.
Absolutely.
It's like, look, the cowboy,
Yeah.
the Marlboro
The
cowboy smoked
rugged
cigarettes.
individualist, you know, and
And he also died early of cancer.
we're not going to talk about that part. When they used to literally say the doctors recommend, you know, filtered
like
cigarettes.
4 out of
So,
5
like,
doctors recommend this brand of
and
cigarettes.
that's a whole different rabbit hole of, you know, the
The
insidious
fifth
nature
doctor
of
got shot and buried.
marketing.
No, we won't say that.
But yeah, that emotional component, though, I think that's massively underrepresented when we're talking about addiction, and in particular. I think that addiction is really an attempt to connect.
Yeah, it's like, because everything I've seen, and I've been in situations, I've met addicts of all varieties, and it's like it's trying to fill a void, or it's trying to find a way to, like you said, connect. Like I realized, it took a long time to realize this, but I used to smoke pot not because I really wanted to. I did, I won't lie. I smoked pot back in the day more because other people around me, it loosened them up to big ideas and talking about bigger things and like deep philosophy or spirituality.
That maybe you already wanted to talk about that type of stuff. Yeah,
exactly.
I relate to that.
It's like, it was like social lubricant where, you know, I could smoke and it didn't change. It felt like being high, of course, but it didn't change.
It wasn't your first time thinking about deep stuff or something
Like
that.
I walk around. I live in deepness. I don't know how to describe it. It's
I'm with you. You don't have to describe it to me.
I live there, and it's, you know, and it's like when we all smoked, you know, my group of friends, we'd smoke, and then it's like, oh, hey, you guys are in the neighborhood now. Cool, let's talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
And then we could. Because if you, again, observation, I don't know how true, we haven't done studies on it, but most people you walk up to, if you start talking about a deep topic, a ton of people have very set beliefs because they're so identified with those beliefs. And it's like, if those beliefs shake or are questioned, their entire identity is questioned.
And then they question you, and they become defensive.
If you're the one making them think differently, because it's easy to make, I hate to say it, but it's pretty easy there's a whole study and field called marketing that is purposefully influencing people's thoughts. But
It's basically hypnosis.
yeah, and a lot of people are unaware of that though. Like they just don't have the knowledge, or they haven't looked into it, or
The exposure, the
whatever it may
curiosity,
be. Yeah. And again, if you're happy and you're blissfully ignorant, which is ignorance is bliss. It really is, because you don't know any better.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just we're in a weird time where like no one really has excuses not to know certain things, because we have the Library of Alexandria in our pockets now. And it's just a strange...
Oh my God.
We're trying to deal with stuff that humans have never, ever had to deal with that we're aware of. There's never been an internet. There's never been global communication.
I know.
For anyone.
It's absolutely overwhelming. And that's really what this podcast was ironically a response to, is the internet, and the specifically the insidious nature of social media.
God, dude.
You know, but we don't have to get too deep into that. There's a few things that you mentioned that I really kind of want to go off on. I guess since I'm slightly losing my train of thought, the only thing I can really think about is when you're talking about, I want to bring it back to,
sure.
You were talking about people that basically don't seem like they have any interest in growing.
Yeah.
Okay, so I wanted to respond to that. And I know in the past, in our conversations, you've used the word seeker before. Okay, so I want to
I just liked it, yeah.
Yeah. No, it's not a bad word. I just kind of want to bridge those two ideas real quick. So first of all, I originally was saying that we don't know what's going on inside of another person. We also don't know what each of us have metaphorically, or maybe in a way that I don't know, maybe consciously chose to experience in this particular life.
Yeah.
You know? Again, speaking in metaphor, or maybe it's true. I don't know. I think life is a metaphor. I don't think I think it's, again, our limited ability to perceive the depth of truth with a capital T.
Yeah, we'll just keep
that blurs those lines, or that wants to keep things in one camp rather than the other, you know? But even facts are fluid. So anyway, what I'm trying to say is that I like to look at life as the metaphor of like playing a video game. So, you know, we have games for all sorts of different experiences. You know, maybe some of us here are here to play the game of awakening to the game, and maybe from the game. And some of us are here to just experience the game, to experience being lost in the sauce, or being stagnant, or getting to your deathbed and feeling regret, or living a simple life and being content.
Yeah.
That's an option too. We don't all need to shake the foundation of reality in each ego lifetime, you know? So I think it's all what it is, which is a really dumb way of saying that it's... I'm avoiding saying it's all where it needs to be, because need implies urgency. And I don't think there's anything urgent about playing this game. Well, it's just an experience. It's the universe unfolding itself. There's no reason. There's no rhyme, you know? There's a design, but there's no designer. It's the way I see it, you know?
Yeah.
There's order, but there's no
I got to touch
architect.
on that there's design, but no designer. Like, this is where I'm at now. What I believe, like where I've come to realize, I think God, in all its context, in all the ways people phrase it, I think what it is like basically ideal humanity, right? If you look at people, comparatively speaking to every other animal on the planet, we're the only thing that we know of that knows that it's gonna die one day.
And how could we know of any other species knowing
we don't
anything?
really know what they know.
We can measure our perceptions, but we can't measure other entities' experiences.
The only thing that I
that's the limitation of science.
The only thing I push back is we can see physical manifestations of like depression or something, or like anxiety. Mm-hmm. You can measure heart rate, and different things, and see, and
But we can't measure the experience.
No, we can't.
We can only experience it.
We only
So
observe
we don't know what's
what
going
we
on in other
see.
animals.
Yeah.
You know, we think, and I think it's an ego thing. I think it's a human arrogance thing that we think we're at the top of the food chain or top of the consciousness hierarchy. You know, but and when we are able to observe massive intelligence in other animals, you know, dolphins,
absolutely.
other apes and things
And maybe
like that.
it is just a
Elephants.
evolutionary thing that we're able to manipulate the environment the way we are.
Yeah.
Because, like, you know, dolphins don't have thumbs.
Yeah. But for all we know, dolphins could also like literally transport their consciousness to a whole other planet where they're the ones with legs and thumbs. You know, they could be so much more super intelligent than we can even fathom.
Yeah.
There's just no way to observe that. There's no way to know. So it's just Anyway, but you were making a point.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, like,
trying to at least before I interrupted.
This is where it is for humans, for people.
Yeah.
We don't see anything else having the influence we do. Like, it's undeniable that human beings influence the planet more than any other animal that's ever walked.
Yeah, and
here.
So
and I'm not saying like I'm not even talking about like global warming and all that. Like, we contribute, but there's tons of evidence that one volcanic eruption can cause an ice age. Like, it's really complicated. Yeah. It's more than just humans. Like, it's
also not mind-boggling to acknowledge that, you know, the way that we run our society is not sustainable. I mean, let's put our face up 100%. To our mufflers and see if that's sustainable.
Dude,
you know, clearly we're I'm not convincing you. I'm just, you know, for the sake of,
I'm not denying that at all. But
many factors.
I'm all for renewables and solar, and it's improved, and it's at the point. I think they said like you can power the entire Earth with solar by like one tiny. Well, it's not small, but it's like 400 or 500 square miles in the Sahara Desert or something. Like, could power the whole Earth.
I believe it. I mean, Tesla had a plan for free energy for the whole Earth, and I don't know when he was around, but
and wireless transfer of power, like.
So
he had internet. It was in the 1904 or something.
Is that what it was earlier?
He came out with a plan for the internet. And
he was brilliant.
He got actively cut off from it. His lab in New York got burned by Edison. Mm-hmm. He got cut off from Chase Bank. They cut all ties from him.
Yep.
And then he was too nice of a guy, and instead of like keeping his royalties at Westinghouse, he just cut ties and said, "Oh, I feel for you. I'll cut losses," because he wasn't about business. He wanted to advance things. And he was a visionary, and he didn't care about money. And people like make him into a bad person for, you know, dying broke. But who cares? You die broke anyway.
Right.
Yeah, you can't take your toys with you.
The next life. Yeah. But I mean, I think that's just a perfect example of what you said of science is way beyond technology and the application of technology.
Yeah.
You know?
It's not even funny.
And it's not even just a lag of time. It's a lag of priority.
Right.
You know? We're prioritizing
and this goes like
and greed over
to
harmony.
Expand on some of it, like the seeker thing. Like literally language is just a classification of things we see and agree on.
Mm-hmm.
And so like we can both observe. It's Shakespearean even, where when two people see something supernatural, it means it's real. It's like a real ghost if two characters see it at the same time. But if one person sees it, it's dubious. It could be real. It could be just a psychotic delusion.
Yeah.
Like, you don't know. Macbeth has it all over. There's times where they see the witches. A couple people see the witches. And then there's times where Macbeth is just out of his mind. And that's a literary device he used. He invented. We didn't have it before. At least we don't have records of it before. But he invented that literary device. And it's true, too. And it's biblical. Like, it's the whole point of Christ saying, where two are gathered in my name, anything's possible.
Yeah.
It's the exact same thing throughout human history where when two people come together, come to the same conclusion, observe each other, agree, see the same thing, they can take something that's in their head and manipulate reality and bring it forth.
Yeah.
And that's where the concept I think of God even comes from, that that we can have a thought and make it real. These shoes I'm wearing, the jeans, all this stuff. They didn't have jeans 300 years ago.
Yeah.
It was someone's thought, and they made it manifest from their brain. That sounds delusional if you just talk to random people about it, but you do it every day.
In this
I want to make
paradigm,
tea.
yeah.
I get a cup, which we named and made, designed. It's all intentional. And that's where I guess it circles back where you could, like you were saying, that there's nothing that's necessarily random. It's just that given the variables set to this mode in this time, that's the outcome. And it's hard to account for all the variables.
Right.
It's
Especially
impossible.
with these little feeble brains.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we get closer with computer assistance, but I don't know if we'll ever get there. It's just like mathematicians. There's this Netflix thing talking about to infinity or something. It's about infinity and that concept.
Cool. Let's check that out.
Yeah, and they're saying that the universe is expanding faster than the speed of light, is what most physicists and all this stuff. But I'm like, okay, what? So you're saying billions of years from now, when I'm long dead, like we're gonna blink out or something? I don't. It's too much. It's not worth our time. It's mental gymnastics.
Exactly. And I don't know. I mean, I think.
And meanwhile, people are starving next door.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. We're gonna have to bookmark that part of the conversation. I would love to get into infinity with you, but I want to bring it back to God.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So
I never wrapped up that thought, I guess.
Did you have something else you wanted to conclude about it?
Basically, I think God is humanity's best effort to describe what it is that we do.
Yeah.
And we don't see any other creature. We don't know that they don't do it. Like, does a beaver conceptualize how it's building the dam, or is it instinctual and automatic programming?
Yeah.
Right? We, however, can choose, do we build a dam? Do we not build a dam? Where do we build a dam? What's the impact going to be? We can even create predictable models using these computers in our heads, and we can model out all, like, as many as of the different scenarios as possible. To minimize and like enhance probability or decrease it of success. Like that's something that we don't observe readily in other creatures.
I mean,
and I think God's like the ultimate of that. We're like, if we can do this in this local domain on Earth, is there something that's even more powerful than us that can do it on a universal level?
Sure.
That's, I think, where that comes from.
Sure.
It's our own self-expression in a way.
Absolute self-expression. There, you nailed it. You know, I was getting a little caught up. I was wavering between agreeing wholeheartedly and then getting caught up with like the semantics, which again is literally just my association to the syntax that we call language, butting heads with your association to the syntax called language.
And that's why conversations are great, to get on equal terms.
To iron out those inconsistencies.
Exactly.
Because I absolutely agree with the idea that God can be a placeholder word for the idea of the creativity, human creativity. But I was getting caught up by like, why are you saying human creativity? Well, like what's different between what we do in our human species versus, I mean, we can't take credit for everything that happened before human evolution,
Not at all.
right? So that, to me, that's God too.
The only reason
the
I
beaver
say
doing the damn thing, that's God too.
The reason I say human, and that because this is different, like we're bridging into like metaphysics in a way. Like, so the reason I put human there, human creativity, it's because everything we see, every single thing, right, comes from our own perspective.
Yeah.
We don't go consult the beaver and get its perspective. We can't.
Yeah.
We don't know how. Maybe can't is a strong word, because so far
Sure.
we've broken throughout history. If you pluck someone out of 0 AD and put them today, they would have a meltdown. Maybe. Because of the technology, like the things that we've proven over time.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes into limitations and all that
But how does
stuff.
that relate to the
the reason it's human is because all we ever know is human. We don't know the other perspectives.
Yeah, well, that's just a given to me. I guess I don't feel the need to say human creativity.
If I were to define God, and I'm more talking about like general, but it, like for me, like personally, if I were to define God, I'd say it's like, it's essentially life and the expression of such.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that there's a unifying feature, which is energy of the entire universe. Yeah. And it's proven in all ways, scientifically, spiritually, like no matter how you look at it, energy exists everywhere. Even places we think there's no energy, the more we come up with ways to see things, we're realizing, oh, there is. There's like anti-energy and like weird
so much
stuff.
So much to the mystery. We know it's infinite, yet we keep trying to look.
Yeah, because we're curious creatures.
Which is cool, yeah.
But cool. That's where I love there's a new chemical view of the universe where it's not finite. It's just that the universe is always trying new things. Yeah. And it's always looking to see what new combinations of energy or building blocks work. Mm-hmm. And so, I can't remember the guy's name, but he's a chemist and he's from England. He talked on Lex Friedman podcast, and he talked about this theory he came up with where, like, most base level reality, like sand and rocks and stuff like that, it's at most 3 layers of complexity biologically or chemically. Sure. So like it's just not complicated molecules. But when you get to life, things get really complicated. And you'll have stacks of like 19, 20 layers for certain compounds.
It's a system now rather than a substance.
Yeah, and so it seems like what he says, it's like the universe creates things, and you start with a simple atom of hydrogen, 1 proton, no neutrons, just 1 proton, 1 electron, just hanging out. And it builds on that, and things it's like Legos, and it's like the universe naturally is playful and wants to try these things.
Yeah.
And again, we're putting human emotions on something we have no idea about.
Yeah.
But it's fun to do, so we'll keep we'll keep doing it. Mm-hmm. So anyway, the universe is playing with these things and making different stacks, and certain things work a little more than others. Certain things aggregate better. And then when it finds something that works, it goes in on it. And since it's infinite and keeps expanding and growing and more is coming, and we just never know. We will never know the limits of the universe if they exist. Right. Never know. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. Anyway, it's just trying these new iterations and things. And even looking at genetics, it's the same thing. Over time, any species, from a biological model, you're trying different variations and see what works. And some things worked great. Like horseshoe crabs have been around almost forever. From our perspective, way longer than us, if we look at an evolutionary standpoint. Mm-hmm. Or sharks even. They're practically dinosaurs in the water. There's certain things, certain microbes, those little elephant-looking tardigrades, elephant-looking micro animal.
Okay.
Tardigrades are really interesting. You should look into it if you ever get the itch. But they're these little biological animal, and they can survive extreme temperatures. They've taken them down to like a few degrees above absolute zero.
What's their habitat? Are they in the ocean?
They're all over the place.
They're just microscopic, like...
Yeah, I think they find them in like those deep ocean sulfuric craters. They're in the most extreme environments you wouldn't think life could exist.
Gotcha.
And then we find these things. Huh. And they can just hang out in almost any environment. Just very hardy creature. And it's not just a bacterium, it's like more complex than that, which is cool. And it just helps us see that like there's surprises everywhere, and
Yeah.
kind of losing where I was
No,
going
I'm with
with it,
you. I
yeah.
think it goes to show too the limit of our, I don't know how to put this, our dimension, if you will. You know, we can look at the microscopic dimension and we can view it from above. We can look out into the macrocosm. We can look at the outer space.
Yeah.
But we can't look at ourselves from that macroscopic space.
You can
So that's
imagine it.
Yeah.
But you can't really do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
So, you know, to
interesting.
me, like, and anyone that listens to this podcast has probably heard me say that I'm not a scientifically minded person. So I'm just in awe letting you, like, say everything you just said. Like, that all sounds really cool. I know what you're saying. I don't know how it works. But I also don't really have an urgency to, like, figure out how it works.
Yeah.
Because I just trust the mystery. And I think that's...
And that's something
maybe
I think
as
we've
far
lost.
as I can go with this personality is just to surrender to the mystery. I don't think my mind can fathom that aspect of infinity, because I'm like, oh, it's infinite, cool, I'll stop looking, because that sounds tiring. You know. But what were you about to say? We've lost
well,
what?
I just think we've lost that you know, part of the enjoyment is not knowing.
Yeah, totally.
And that's where the randomness comes in. Like, it's like you can use randomness as that not knowing. Because if you knew everything, all the variables, all of that, like, that's what people call God, is knowing omnipotence.
Yeah.
Knowing everything, right? And
Right.
we can try as much as we want, and a lot of people have. We'll never know everything.
Right.
If we did, someone would still be alive who had never died. You know, like, if you knew everything, you wouldn't have to die, or if you didn't want to.
Or you would just know why you need to die. But
yeah, it's like, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Because it's a day and night, and you know that's my big thing.
And that could have happened, and it just never got recorded.
Exactly.
Someone could have known exactly the rest of their life and been fine with it.
Wouldn't that be what enlightenment is? Or total awakening? You know, it would be the ego dissolving itself back into the Godhead, so to speak. You know, the all-knowing.
That's where shit gets trippy, because, like...
Well, it gets trippy when we... or maybe, it gets
I almost
trippy.
don't even want to say it, because it's, like, so trippy for a lot of people. But I really think, like, all of us are divine.
Oh, of course.
Anything that has life.
It's insanity to believe that we're not.
Yeah, anything alive is divine.
Yeah.
But, dude, that's the problem. You said it's insanity to believe we're not divine. But most people I've ever met in my entire life, 99% of them, if you said that, they would literally try and kill you.
Yes.
Because I tried, and they literally tried to kill me.
That's why I don't want to associate with spiritual communities that spout that type of belief, because that is insanity. I think that it is insane. You know, so you and I had a conversation maybe a year ago, and you were very identified as Christian at the time, and you've since kind of distanced yourself from that a little bit. And I want to get into that, but before doing so, I just want to. What do I want to do? I guess I wanted to rage out about the Christian church there for a second, but the moment's passed. I don't need to do that. I guess it's really hard for me to associate with an institution that has done, I think, a lot of damage to the spiritual community, to physical communities. You know, we can talk about the actual genocide that has happened with righteousness, with faith behind it.
Well, and that's where there's other religions that I won't mention that have done the exact same thing.
Oh, absolutely.
And
you know,
I'm with you.
I don't have an issue with spiritual communities. I have an issue with when the spiritual community, and it's really hard to avoid this in a spiritual community, for it to degrade into a cult. And I think most major religions have, on one hand, beautiful perspectives and takes on what it means to be human. On the other hand, most are corrupted by ego and corrupted by human shadow and the lack of self-awareness, which is what each inspiration for these major religions, Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, these were individuals
who weren't following a religion necessarily. I mean, in some cases they were, but that's not what their spiritual enlightenment came from.
A place. We all come from a place.
Yeah.
Like
They had their
Jesus
cultural
came
context, of
from
course.
Judaism.
Yeah. And Buddha came from Hinduism, and Muhammad, I'm sure, had his thing.
Came from...
I'm not as familiar with Islam.
I don't know.
But,
it'd be interesting to learn more.
Yeah. But my point is that they are individuals that did the work. They did the reflection. They sat in stillness. They sat in the divine space for long enough to realize that they are divinity. And that everything around them is a mirror.
And that's...
dude, maybe they made the mistake of talking about it. I don't know.
Dude. Okay, I gotta tell you, because this is you're describing in a different way the arc of kind of where I went.
Yeah.
So when we had that conversation, like I was just getting into that church. Because it was like beginning of this year when we talked, I think. I was just getting in, okay. I was seeking out like a church and stuff. My dad had just died. I'm like, there has to be a soul. There has to be something here. Mm-hmm. So I was looking for answers, and I had already been colored with Christianity, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to find other churches, to be honest, too. Or not churches necessarily, but other religions and communities. It's hard to find them here. So anyway, Christianity was the one I was looking at. So I tried out all these different churches. I even went back to a Catholic mass, and I hadn't been in years and years and years. And I finally found one where their big emphasis was on knowing the Bible. Okay? That was their big focus. And that was what I wanted to do, because I'd never really dove deep into it. So I wanted to. And I wanted to go with people who maybe have. All right? A lot of this is coming from a place of, as a student, essentially, like I'm looking to learn, I'm seeking out truth. Okay? Mm-hmm. Well, I get into here and I start learning slowly and things, and I've never been one to just take someone else's word for it.
Yeah.
Unless they're like, teach me, like if you're teaching me how to saw a piece of wood and measure.
Yeah.
That's a physical, real thing. So what was your way of
testing what you were hearing then?
So with that kind of stuff, it's almost trial and error. You can't take people's word for it a lot of times when it comes to this.
Of course.
Because again, what we've mentioned before.
Yeah, that's when it becomes culty.
A lot of people don't introspect at all. Like they've never journaled once in their whole life. They've never sat in a room and thought about, God, what did I do wrong? Or what can I do to better my life? Or what is the meaning of life? Like none of it. They've never thought about it.
I don't know.
But I don't know.
Maybe
you can't. It's hard to speak for others.
That way, but I don't know.
Just from conversations with said people, it seems like they have.
Sure.
Because their eyes glaze over when you get on one of these topics. That's a huge clue to me.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I get in, and I'm like learning from some of these people and whatnot, and it seemed like they were like a less judgy version of this type of church. Okay. So I'm doing my thing, learning. Then I start to study more and more on my own. And the more I studied the Bible on my own, the more my views started diverging from the group's views.
Okay.
It hit a point, because my cousin was like kind of on this path with me too. And she was starting to send me videos from some more like, I don't know how you would say it, radical Christians who take things like all the way literally, which is cool because it's like in the book of Acts in the Bible, it describes how if you become a follower of Jesus, like you're given gifts of the Holy Spirit, like where you can like literally help heal other people, literally. Mm-hmm. And they wrote it down. So that's where my cousin and I we were running into trouble because we wanted more than what we were getting from the church. But knowing what I know now, I think a lot of the writing is either corrupted or it's metaphorical. Mm-hmm. You can't take it literally. Yeah. And that's where there's a letter in there. It's like 1 Timothy or something. A lot of people quote it as a good reason why women need to be totally submissive to men. And when you read it, and I read so much, I read all the letters, like I could tell Paul didn't write that letter at all. Because in it, he also says something like words don't matter. But back in his time, the historical Paul was an adamant scholar. Scholars are not going to say words don't matter. They care deeply about words and language and understanding.
Well, unless
you know
they're
what
saying
I mean?
it in a similar way that we sort of said that earlier today. It's like we have to use these tools that we're given, language, to communicate, but we have both acknowledged the limitation of language, even in this conversation.
There are limits.
And yet we continue to talk to each other,
But it matters, right? A conversation matters because it helps us get to a better place, right?
And then
Without it, we
the
can't.
Translation, it's been translated, 4 times at the very minimal?
Exactly.
So
there's problems
what
with
does that
it.
mean? What was
problems.
that really pointing towards?
Exactly. And there's you have language problems translating from Greek to English or what have you, or Aramaic, which is an alternate form of Hebrew. It's not modern Hebrew.
Okay.
And there's a lot of issues with translations.
Right.
But anyway, I was reading more and more. I was studying. And when I read this particular place I was going to, they would read like 3 verses and dive deep. Spend an hour talking about 3 or 4 verses of a certain chapter.
Yeah.
But when I was reading, I learned through school and studying, like the way to read is you read for the concept first, then you go into the details. So I was reading for the concept, and the concepts I was gathering from the Bible were not what most people were even aware of, let alone acknowledge. In fact, a lot of the stuff they would talk and teach about didn't even fit the conceptual version of the Bible, so to speak, the narrative version of it. So like I was learning stuff, and I really like Jesus. He seems like a cool dude. He had great ideas, just his ideas, not people's interpretations of them. The stuff he literally supposedly said.
Well, even those are the interpretations in some sense.
Fair
the
enough.
translations of,
and there's some authors remembering
translations
it.
of interpretations.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I feel you.
But that's like
the archetype
as
of
far
Jesus.
as fidelity, that's the
yeah.
closest thing we have to a I don't know what the right word is.
Yeah.
That's the closest thing we have to the real thing. If
I don't know.
presuming
I don't even
it's
agree
there.
with that, but
Anyway, as far as we know, we don't know.
I'd say the closest thing we have to relate to Jesus Christ is probably taking magic mushrooms, but go on.
Well, that's another thing that gets left out.
Get that direct experience, see what he was really talking about.
Well,
really get in the listening space.
Have you heard of the Eleusinian Mysteries?
Is that the idea that Jesus was a mushroom?
No. The Eleusinian Mysteries was like all the ancient Greek and Roman, the biggest names throughout history, including Plato and Aristotle and Pythagoras. They would go to a special temple and drink an ergotamine substance, because wheat is where we get ergots from. And ergotamines are like either constituents or like LSD falls in.
Yeah, it's sort of derived from that,
Yeah. So they knew a way to create a special brew, and a lot of people believe that when Jesus talked about drink this wine, it's a special brewed wine or drink that was psychoactive.
Yeah, no doubt.
And there's records in the church. The cult of Dionysus did this. It wasn't just beer or wine that they drank. It was like psychoactive beer or wine. And so the Eleusinian Mysteries, all these ancients that we revere for groundbreaking new innovations, did drugs, basically.
What we call drugs, they would call it something else. And that's again the insanity
they drank
of our
a
current
brew
culture.
And they had this, they experienced ego death. Is what they describe.
And community
and they
too.
say, if you die before you die, you have nothing to fear. Was their mantra. And so they would do these rituals, and they had it ritualized, and they had a set and setting. They had a good place. You could do it. Go hang out. You're not going to hurt yourself. We're going to guide you back
there
to
were people that knew how to guide through the
grounded.
process.
Exactly. And so a lot of people believe, not a lot, there's people who believe that early Christianity was the same thing. It was a new form of Dionysus or Elysian mysteries, all of that.
Yeah. Just real quick, I just want to note that, and I'm making a claim that I obviously have no way of backing up, but I would be willing to bet that every indigenous culture had some sort of rite of passage 100%. In this way.
Yeah.
That, from modern standpoint, we would say that they were doing drugs together, but to them it was not. Maybe they would call it medicine. Maybe it was not even medicine. Maybe it was just considered a portal to the underworld or the portal to heaven, or in some way peeking behind the veil.
Yeah.
Of consensus reality.
Yeah, breaking base reality, if you want to call it that.
And it was an honored ritual and ceremony, and it had purpose within the culture. And that's I believe strongly that is another example of the insanity of our current paradigm,
1000%, yes.
Current culture, where we have demonized psychedelics, classified them as dangerous drugs, legally putting them in the same category as heroin and other things, while on the same token making billions of dollars off of alcohol every year.
And legal psychoactive drugs,
such as
anything in the mental health pharmaceutical catalog, are
which
legal psychoactive
much less
drugs.
Understood.
Much less understood, much more dangerous physically and mentally.
Yeah.
Like, they're not...
Way more symptoms, side effects.
It's kind of terrifying when you read about it. Like,
Thankfully, I do feel that we are shifting from that.
Hopefully.
Mushrooms in particular are getting a lot more esteem, being studied at Johns Hopkins and, decriminalized in certain areas, but it's still, the stigma is very much there. I still feel it anytime I bring it up.
I don't know if I saw recently an old military documentary from when they did MK Ultra.
Okay.
So that's been declassified now. Some of it. They still do it, I believe. But basically, I'm pretty sure the reason stuff got outlawed was because they realized that LSD and mushrooms, things like that, but especially LSD, that was huge in the 60s.
Yeah.
They realized, not just from the culture, but from their own experiments, that it didn't control people. It did the opposite.
Yeah.
It led to people waking up and realizing, why am I just enslaving myself to your mindset? Because they did experiments with military guys, and they first did it. They drilled these guys with just normal military drills where you just march around or whatever. They were doing perfectly fine, flawless execution, etc. And it was voluntary. That part of it, at least, was voluntary. Then they gave them doses of LSD, and it all went to shit. And everyone was just laughing around and goofing off, and the drills just didn't happen. And then they had a drill sergeant that they dosed, and before he was doing a great job and could get these guys doing it. And then after they dosed them, well, he just starts hanging out and carousing with the guys, and they don't really drill. And then they come and say, you have to drill. If you don't drill, we're going to have to take you away from your job here right now. And he said, well, if you want them to drill so bad, you do it yourself. And that kind of that's insubordination,
Literally.
And what they tracked with that was the whole culture had that with Vietnam.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the same conversation of why did they silence Tesla? Here was a opportunity to make a simple solution, a free global solution to our energy relationship to electricity and energy.
Practically free, infinite electric.
I mean, I don't know the ins and outs of it, but that's the narrative that I've heard. And, it's absolutely the same thing. It's just, the powers that be that don't want to relinquish any hold over the hypnosis of the human spirit. For what reason other than profit and greed? I don't know. I don't really believe in the nefarious, conspiracy agenda type stuff. Like, just because it's not that interesting to me, because I'm not that interested in stories like that. I'm more interested in what is the absolute depth, the root truth, and the grandest truth. And to me, like getting lost in the details of, and the paranoia that comes along with the details.
Yeah.
I don't really entertain that too much in my mind. I'm not saying that it's not real for some people. I also believe in fluid reality. I think that what we focus on and what we believe in becomes manifest in our experience, which is kind of what you're getting at with the God-human dynamic.
Yeah.
Which I did want to actually comment on real quick. And since I came back to it, we'll finish your story. But real quick, you were talking about God. When you were originally talking about God and relating it to humanity, you were saying that it's the idea of being able to imagine something and then bring it to life, essentially.
Yeah.
Right?
Basically.
And that's, have you heard of Neville Goddard?
Yeah.
That's his whole thing, dude. That's his whole thing, is the idea that human imagination.
He's been really influential on me, actually.
Me too, big time.
I listen to a lot of his tapes.
Yeah.
Because they're on YouTube. Kind of hidden in YouTube, but...
Yeah. I know about him secondhand through this podcast called Synchronicity, which I actually think you would really enjoy. I think you would relate a lot to. Noah Lampert is the host of that.
There's actually science about synchronous events. It's weird. But it's in the quantum physics realm. Things get weird.
That's
the more we're learning, the more things get weird.
And the crazy part is that quantum physics is 100 years old. It started in the 1920s, and it's so slow to catch up to mainstream paradigms. But anyway, so I just wanted to relate that to the Neville Goddard thing for anyone that's not familiar with Neville. His whole thing is that what people call God is essentially imagination.
Yep.
And it's not just the visual component of imagining something in your third eye or whatever, having dreams or whatever. The feeling space is huge in that too. So he's got a number of techniques for magnetizing the experiences that you want in life into your actual lived experience, what people would call manifestation and stuff like that. I kind of avoid using that term.
And he was around before The Secret and all this stuff that got commercialized and made. I think people bastardized like the original intent of some of this, or like the original way of thinking,
or the validity of it, because The Secret was such a, again, like a caricature of itself at some point. It just became a joke, and it was sort of oversimplifying a lot of the process. And in that way maybe has done a little bit of damage in the overall zeitgeist of our relationship to manifestation. Now a lot of people think it's sort of a woo, kind of quacky joke, where it's really, I mean, just look at it from a basic level, how you were describing it. We manifested everything you see in society, and you can say, oh, you didn't manifest it, you worked hard for it and you made it happen. Well, like,
but
where do those lines get blurred? Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So anyway, Neville's he's a huge influence on me. Just the idea that it is very much a mind over matter type of relating.
It is.
And I believe that. I believe that there's a timeless existence, and maybe that's the highest expression of what people are pointing at when they say God. This the void, the timeless,
the nothingness where everything comes from,
where everything is springing in and out of at all times, even on a quantum level. You were talking about atoms as if they're like building block Lego pieces of biological matter, and while that is true, what are those Legos made out of? What are those building blocks made of? They're not finite, tiny little things. They're actually potentialities. They're vastly comprised of empty space. And then these little quarks of consciousness basically are forming themselves.
And you bring up empty space and potentiality, and the Tao talks about this a lot. Like a pot. What's useful about a pot? It's not the clay around that makes the shape. It's the void inside of it that can carry things. That's what's useful about it. The spoke on, like a wheel. What's useful about a wheel? It's not the spokes and all of it, it's the empty space in the middle that it spins around. and attaches to the axle. Like, the useful things are the empty things. It's the emptiness. A room is only as good as what you can do in it. And if it's filled with junk and you can't do anything in it, the room's useless.
Absolutely.
But when it's emptied out and then there's potential. Then you can do things.
Absolutely. And I love that.
Yeah, it's amazing. And that's where, so like I got into Neville Goddard big time. And probably a little after we talked, or around that time, was when I was getting into him. Because that's kind of the line my path took. I went more towards his view of Christianity.
Yeah.
Rather than the mainstream view, I'll say.
Right. Yeah.
So I never really. Okay, what happened? The way Christianity is structured in the Bible, if you take it kind of at its word.
Yeah.
It leads you, if you do it from a in detailed take it or leave it level, you end up believing that there's this like daddy in some mystical place up above us, ethereal place, and he came in a weird human form and told us how to do things, and you got to be perfect. And then there's a lot of problems around that with humans using it to shame others and control them and guilt and all that. But if you take it from a conceptual level and don't take it perfectly literally, what happens is you come to a point, it's like a prescription. Certain ways that Christ advocates, it's just like other religions. It's a prescription of how to get to divinity. You do these steps.
Did you say divinity?
Divinity,
okay.
And I misspoke. I didn't speak it clearly.
It kind of sounded like divinity and infinity in one.
I said a weird...
Definity.
Yeah, it was a weird mumble.
Oh, wait, that's like definite. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Tripping on words
good,
again.
Dude.
You know me.
Just getting high on words here, folks.
Man, maybe that should be the slogan of the podcast.
Dude.
Sorry, go on.
Oh, man. Yeah, anyway...
So it's a prescription.
Conceptually, you start to pull, when you look at it from a concept instead of getting bogged in the weeds, you end up pulling back, so you get the big picture. And the big picture is, like, God or the divine nature of humanity has tried to wake people up for millennia, right? If you go from the very beginning to Jesus, if you want to say, biblically.
Yeah.
Even from Adam and Eve, like what happened, I think the problem with the whole Adam and Eve story, it wasn't that some magical fruit turned humans into like divine beings.
Yeah.
It was that the man knew that by doing something it would cause harm. And the woman didn't know yet because she was newer to the game. And the man ignored his own knowledge, his own divinity, ignored knowing that the truth and the correct thing, and just went to appease another person instead of honoring that. And that's what led to problems. And it's not even a knock on, it's not like saying women aren't capable of making good decisions. It has nothing to do with gender at all, really. It could be two bros.
Yeah.
The story wouldn't change. Yeah. It's just even more impactful.
There's the OG and there's the newbie.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's
exactly.
not a man-woman thing.
Yeah. And so because Adam is like the idealized human, the first man, you could even argue that it's a story about the first time people became conscious. You know, and we finally woke up and we're conscious. We realize we have existential dread now. We can like manipulate reality. We can own things by naming them and understanding them and not fearing them. Mm-hmm. Like it's a powerful thing. And then a new person or a new being, it could be a dad and a kid. It doesn't really matter. Because that's the relationship to God to Adam anyway. It's a father and a kid. Same with Jesus, a father and a kid. It's like the eternal truth trying to speak and wake up the creation that came about from that. So and it's like but I don't want us to get lost on that.
Okay.
Basically, the arc was like, you see conceptually, Jesus has a prescription to get to the Godhead, essentially, but people don't see it because they get too bogged in the weeds and arguing over semantics. They're not reading for the concept, I would argue. And a lot of what's taught about the Bible is people trying to say, you should live a way I think is right.
Right.
It's trying to control.
It's about morality.
So, like, my view starts as, like, you know, somewhat standard Christian, like, this is the right way. That's God's kid, or that's God as a person, whatever.
Yeah.
But then it started evolving. And this is when I started getting more in trouble even within that group, because my views were diverging from theirs. I was forking, if you want to use a tech term for it. I forked from their views, where it's like, holy crap, we can be like Jesus if we follow. He's literally telling us how to be like him. And then it gets to a point, it kept evolving. It got to a point where it's like, wait a minute, what? I am God? And that's like a huge deal, dude. Like, because this time, like, I got there sober. Like, holy fucking shit, I'm God. Like, I'm God like Jesus. Oh my God.
Was this an experience or a
It was both.
mental realization?
It was both. It was like experiential and mental. I think a lot of it was finally forgiving myself for shit I'd done in the past.
Is that what the catalyst was? Like, I'm curious what the trigger,
the big trigger,
what the actual moment
so like
was.
a lot of this happened in May.
Yeah.
And things kind of went quickly after that. Like, a long time ago, I did something I'm not proud of. I don't really want to go into details, but
Yeah, we don't have to do the whole story.
working through and learning about it, because something Christ advocates in the Bible, and again, this gets glossed over by Christians all the time, is forgiveness. And he's saying, you forgive people, and you forgive them because it doesn't mean you keep subjecting yourself to them. You forgive them for your sake, and because you have to realize most people are just reacting. They're not conscious of what they're even doing. He's like basically saying, like, forgive people because they don't understand even what their actions are causing. They don't get it. And that's why on the cross when he died, that story about forgive them, they don't know what they're doing.
Right.
Like, he meant that. He understood psychologically, I'm trying to speak truth. These people hate me for it, because if they admit that, then they have to deal with their own faults and deal with their own insecurities and their own problems, because how can you be God and be imperfect? You know?
I do. Real quick, I just want to say that I feel that in that level, that depth of forgiveness is really about compassion.
Yeah.
It's not just about reconciling sin in this context,
Exactly.
or you did something against me and I'm holding a grudge until I forgive that grudge.
Yeah.
It's not about that. It's about compassion.
Yes, and it's
not just
love.
in an empathy way. Yeah, but like I consider this like this might just be my own associations, but I consider this like a Buddhist compassion, where it's not just empathy. It's literally understanding the non-randomness of nature, and that we are all the way we are because of the experiences we've had, because of our conditioning, you know, because of our personalities and associations with reality.
Yeah.
And so in that way, none of us are missing the mark or sinning or evil. We're just playing out our programming.
Yes, dude. And this is it. That's perfect, because that's how things kept going. I get to this point where it's like, okay, now I'm like Jesus. I'm one with him. And you make mistakes when you're that into that text. You can make mistakes. Like, you can think, like, for a second, you can think like, oh, maybe I can really have faith and heal people with my faith and praying. And a miracle could maybe really happen. And you start playing around with it because you're told to play with it. It, like Christ tells you, go try it. Why not?
Hold faith.
Yeah. And so like, that's where you start getting in trouble, because if you don't contextualize everything and you just pluck a random person, they go around saying, I can heal you by my faith. That scares the shit out of most people.
Up against a ton of cultural conditioning in the other direction.
Yeah. So this is where stuff gets interesting, because so I was like trying to live it out. Like, I try, because what the hell else are you gonna do? If you're supposedly a Christian, you're supposed to follow the words. But most people don't. They just straight up don't. They just like the comfort and socialness of the gatherings. Mm-hmm. They don't really want to go out of their way to do what you're being asked to do.
Do the work, the hard work.
And this is where, like, people take issue where it says, like, you'll have to, like, you're gonna, if you really go this path, you might lose brothers or sisters or friends or families. You might argue, like, that's where he's saying, like, look, I'm not coming here to be a peacemaker. This will divide a lot of people. He even literally says it, and people forget that. They think it's supposed to be some big honky-dory, everyone sees things the same way. No, it's not, because a lot of people seemingly can't handle the truth, the ultimate truth. So you get to this place, right, and you're like, man, I'm now like Jesus. This is crazy. And then you're like, wait a minute, if that's the case, then I am God, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the natural path if you take it, if you go all the way. Mm-hmm. You get to the point and you're like, I am God. Holy crap. But then things start diverging and you're like, wait a minute. So maybe, and this is at least where my mind went, it's like, well, maybe all religions point to this one truth, like God. And perhaps God himself showed up as, like, I went here for a hot second where it's like, maybe everything points towards God. All of it has truth. And it's just that God maybe actually did walk the earth, because my fault was, and it's easy to do, most people do it, I was personifying a universal essence that can't be made into just human. Impossible. Mm-hmm. But it's a logical fallacy that can easily happen. So you get to that point, and you're still personifying God, and then you finally, like, this is where arguably trauma can help wake you up from it, because I believe what I went through, if I hadn't gone through it, I don't know if I would have got to where I am now, where no longer is it identifying as, oh yeah, I'm Yahweh from the Bible, or I'm Jesus, or I'm like Jesus. It's like we are all capable. We're all divine. Life, the essence of life, is what is God. And the fact that human beings are aware of it to the extent we know makes us feel God-like. Because, again, we can take a concept in our head, even a song, like, we bring something to life. We can create life. We are aware that when we have sex, it makes a baby. I don't know, we don't know if animals have that same understanding, that, if I have sex, because we understand we also get natural animalistic urges and impulses. But because of the way we're built, we can override some of our base compulsions.
Instincts,
Yeah, that's like literally that's the definition of civility and civilization, is that we're able to, be more than a base animal.
Oh,
we're able to,
the
like,
irony.
Yeah, I know, isn't it nuts? It's like,
because we might have erected all of these fancy,
from a scholarly view, civility, civilization, or being civilized, being a civilized person, means you're not just a base instinctual animal.
I didn't know that that's what
from a scholarly view, that's what it means. And that is ironic because so many people go around touting these words, but they really don't understand what they mean.
Yeah.
Or where they come from.
Yeah. And we may have, I don't know. I mean, I don't even know that really truly reflects it. I don't know that definition reflects the reality.
Yeah, it's hard to capture.
Because even our expression through technology, like, that is sort of instinctual. I think that was human nature.
Yeah, to pick up a rock and throw it, or whatever.
Or find out that it does something that is useful, and figuring out how to create systems that put that realization, that observation into applied science, which is technology, right?
Yeah.
I think that was our instinct. I don't see anything about civilization.
Now we're getting into free will territory. Like we've been flirting with that the whole time, but
we could do that. That's a side step. We could get into that.
But yeah, basically, man, that's it. Like it's like been this process of like I still believe like Christianity, along with all kinds of other routes, they're paths towards enlightenment. And I even think psychedelics are too, because the worst part was, man,
can be
like I have experience with psychedelics and I tried them in the past and I got to a very similar place, but I didn't have the language or understanding of shut the fuck up around like most people. Like you shouldn't be. I don't know. It's so hard to explain because my stepdad uses the term human nature a lot. He's like, it's just human nature that people want you in a box, or it's human nature that like it's hard for us to accept change in some ways. It's just, and it's really hard to articulate. People have been trying to articulate this stuff since the dawn of time. Yeah. And that's where it's experiential, I think, because you've experienced it from our conversations, I know. Probably anyone who's remotely interested in watching this has experienced some of this.
Or has ever talked to me outside of,
Yeah, it's like you can't tell someone else what it feels like to dissolve your ego. Like, you can describe it, but it's an experience.
Yeah.
Just like getting married or falling in love or having a kid or whatever. Those are things that you experience.
Yeah.
And you can tell someone till your face is blue.
Yeah. And if they ask about it, if they're interested about it, then yeah, sure, describe it. Have fun verbalizing about a experience. But, and that's really why this podcast is called ReMinders. Like, I don't feel like my target audience is people that haven't had experiences similar to what I've had. I think that the only true like value in talking about experiences is when we're talking to people that have had similar experiences, and we can help remind each other of what we experienced, of what we learned in those moments, those isolated incidences of a glimpse of what it feels like to remember that we are divine, not just intellectually, but experientially. And that's such a key difference, To me, maybe that's the difference between like the intellect and spirit, intellectualizing versus spirituality, which I've sort of started to reject that word a little bit because it's becoming such a connotated word in society now. And it's starting to lose its meaning, But yeah, it's experience. I think that's just such a beautiful word to point back to the visceral moment that we experience life and love and all of those things, and pain and trauma and all the things.
It's and all viscera means flesh. It's an ancient word. It means flesh. So visceral, it's in the flesh. You're present, like feeling everything, like union. It's like the core of yoga, even like union, unity. And that's where I got to, man, like with Jesus, the stuff he said, and I only speak from Christian because I just got so well versed in it. But it's like his whole point was like unity, union with the Father as a metaphor for creation, not some dude who's 50 plus years old with a beard. It's all creation. Like, we don't know where all this came from. People have been trying to figure that out since they could talk. We don't know. We'd like to know, but we may never know. It doesn't, and that's the joy of it. And that's why it always talked about be like a kid. Kids don't think about, I'm gonna die tomorrow. Like, they don't think about I gotta pay taxes and all this. They're taking it in as it's all new.
The wonderment of experience.
And then talking about the thing I love the most that gets so overlooked is he says, the kingdom of heaven is now. It's not some faraway place you're trying to strive to get to. It's right now. And you guys are here in it. That's what he's saying. He's like, we're all in it. It doesn't have to be hell right now. Yeah. We're making it hell because we're not awake. We're just asleep. And that's what's so wonderful. But the ironic part is people sign on board, they cross the T's, dot the I's, jump in the water, literally, and like do all the things, but then they don't understand the reality. And part of it is the experience. Yeah. And they used to, back in the early days, we have so much evidence. They used to use psychoactive things to help you experience it. And you were guided through, and you're taught, and you understood. And you died before you died so that you didn't fear death, and you could really live life.
And that doesn't, automatically flip the switch, having a psychedelic experience, a mystical induced experience. But what it does is gives a reference point.
Exactly. So it gives you context.
And then if they have a support system, if they had this experience through psychoactive collaborators or not, it was in a community first and foremost,
where it was
then afterwards
normal.
You still have that community. It was not just normal, but not just accepted, but encouraged. It was a rite of passage. And then you still have that community after the isolated experience to integrate what you had a glimpse of.
That's such a huge thing, is the integration.
Yeah. And that's where we need each other. We need community in that.
Yes. And we're made for that. We're social beings. We're made for each other. Mm-hmm. And we're in such a weird place where, and I was talking to my stepdad about this. Like, I don't know if it's America or, because in some other countries, it seems like if you end up chatting someone up and having a nice time, they seem more inclined to like buy you dinner or buy a drink for you to continue the experience, because people just enjoy. And I've had that in other parts of the States too. It's just like, I don't know, it seems like there's something going on where people are less likely to have community.
There's a big shadow in the United States, And
COVID made it way worse.
Oh, no doubt.
It exposed what was happening. Sure. I don't know which one.
Both, yeah.
Probably both,
yeah. Yeah, well, there's so many things I want to respond to. I'm trying to think which one to focus on now. But I guess I'll start with the Neville Goddard stuff just to reflect what you're talking about. And I haven't gotten that deep into Neville's work. Like I said, I know about him secondhand through the Synchronicity podcast. And what I've heard through Noah on that podcast is that basically all of the characters in the Bible are metaphors of different archetypes of the human psyche.
Yeah, that's Goddard's, and it's wonderful. Like, I can't say I disagree with it.
So like the Christ being that like awakened self.
It's like it's like a meme for the ultimate version of man, or like if you want to use a Nietzsche term, Supermensch or whatever. Like we've hit on it throughout society.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think that's a really cool way of reframing the Bible. But I will say, at least where I'm at in my life right now, I'm still not that interested in that particular story. Sure. And I love and I'll just take the moment to tell you, like, just perceiving you the last year or whatever, and that we had this conversation maybe less than a year ago about, Christianity and stuff. And it wasn't like we were butting heads. Like, I'm able to talk to people that are in religion and still
and
come
I wasn't
to common
trying
ground.
to convert you.
No, you weren't. And I'm
anything
sure that,
either.
We both felt energized by that conversation and everything. But I just want to praise you for a minute and just tell you, like, dude, I'm proud to see that you're on this path of growth and that you know that you're not like just finding one thing and be like, this is the one thing, like maybe that was part of, maybe you went through a phase of doing that.
Definitely
I don't know.
did.
I've
I won't lie.
Done that too.
Yeah, I was stuck in and that's part of what's so beautiful. And it ties in, and that's where, I might have to admit, you might be right about the trauma being purposeful. And that could be the purpose, is that when you learn properly from it, you realize that the harder I just stick my identity to something, the more, I don't know what other word there is, but the more fucked I'll be when it comes.
Stuck you are
if something happens,
your identity
if
to
that
something
gets broken or that mirror gets shattered,
then your whole identity shatters too,
exactly.
and yet there's
and
still
it feels
some part
like
of you.
the end of everything. But meanwhile, that quiet observer that's always been there the whole time is still there.
That's what I was
not
about
judging,
to say.
not saying we're just observing all of it.
Just witnessing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, man.
Absolutely.
So it's like, and that's the thing. That's where it went from like, okay, and now I have the context. Christianity is just one manifestation, one viewpoint, one pathway to the same thing that. And from what I've studied, I think I identify most with the Tao, to be honest. And
me too.
It's just such a beautiful thing, and I'm not going to try and spread it. If people want to learn more, they can ask.
Absolutely. And
we can talk about it one time. That'd be fun.
Yeah.
Only if people want to. Because the whole point is, like, the Tao is about less. It's about, like, there's prescriptions for running a government in there, in that short book. And he's like, yeah, all you got to do is just... feed people, make them happy, and don't govern them. Like, the less you govern, the easier it'll be. Just make them fat and happy, and that's it. And don't step in and try and encroach. Just let them do their thing.
Right.
And if you protect them if you need to, if someone's being a total douchebag and being violent, and you protect your turf. It's just, that's human nature. That makes sense. Because from what we've talked about, I don't know if we'll ever evolve to a point. I'm hopeful that we might, but I don't know if we ever will. Just because we've been trying this stuff for thousands and millions of years.
Forever. Literally forever. I think this is the experience of humanity.
Yeah.
Is to be always at this precipice of the singularity.
Yeah.
And now we are looking at it in such a more visceral way, I would say, with the rise of what people call artificial intelligence and the technology of the internet, and getting on the cloud, and this idea of like merging with technology in that way, transhumanism, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I don't get too deep into that imagination. I haven't put that much thought into it. I do have some feelings about it. I feel, while on one hand, of course, AI is a term that points to a specific technology, I, on a philosophical level, don't really believe in artificial anything.
Yeah.
I think intelligence is intelligence.
Like Sapiens. I think I've told you before, but
you might have,
if you read Sapiens, the author's Yuval Noah Harari, he talks about the exact thing. Anything that exists or comes about is technically natural.
Absolutely.
Where the hell did it come from? It came from here.
Yep.
Nothing. We haven't harvested asteroids yet. We haven't done anything that isn't from Earth.
Yeah.
Everything that it can exist.
And even if it wasn't from Earth, it would still be natural.
Yeah.
The universe is natural.
Exactly. If it exists, it's natural. That's what's a weird... That, like... When I first read that, I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
Dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, my cousin turned me on to that
idea. And then
idea.
it's like morality. Well, is that just people's way of dealing with shit? Yeah. It's not like anyone's more right or more wrong. Certain things like, hey, you probably shouldn't, toss a giant lead ball on top of your head. I'm trying to come up with a thing you can, but it's like, hey, I experienced something and it led to pain.
Yeah.
Experience at your own risk.
Exactly.
But like a lot of times people, and I think that's morality. Like you learn and then you have codes moving forward.
Yeah.
But I think where people go wrong, where it causes problems, is when you try to impose that. Like it's one thing to tell your kid the stove's hot.
Yeah.
You're going to burn your hand.
Yeah.
And it's totally different to say, if you burn your hand, I'm going to brutally punish you because you didn't listen to my code.
Because you're bad.
Or judging and saying you're bad.
I mean, that's really what it comes down. I think
sometimes
that's
it's an accident. Sometimes you just have to learn by experience.
Exactly.
Like we talked about
a lot
before.
of times, to be honest.
Yeah.
But, we can try to take the knowledge of our forecomers, our ancestors or whatever, we can try to take their knowledge and apply it into wisdom in our lives. But a lot of times we do have to just experience our experiences and either integrate the lessons or not and continue to do it. But there's no right and wrong here. And I think that's where conceptual morality is problematic, because it's this assumption that there's one set list of rules, this one set moral high ground. And really, it's what you're getting at. It's really just a recognition that if you take this action, there will be these reactions from the universe.
Yeah.
Consequences to our actions. Some are consequences we would enjoy. Some are consequences that would cause us pain. But none of them are wrong. None of them are evil. Even the most evil thing you can think of, sorry to conjure that image or whatever. Yeah. Sorry to conjure that. Even that, and this is a fucking hot take that so many people don't want to hear, but even the most evil things that you can imagine, they're not wrong. They're just painful.
Yeah.
Well,
and that's
even
where
going through pain, and that's the whole thing that we keep coming back to, is that even going through pain deepens our capacity for experiencing pleasure, for experiencing the bliss of the non-duality.
And that's what's
aspect.
Beautiful is that, and that's what's beautiful about even learning history. Like, we can choose. We have the capacity to be Hitler, and we have the capacity to be Jesus Christ. We can choose.
And most of us are too lazy to choose one or the other.
Exactly.
Most of us are just going to
stay
comfortable.
In fact, they've shown, like, most people don't break the law out of fear of punishment rather than because they're, like, a good person.
Which I would call insanity. I think that's another example of the insane situation.
Yeah, and it's the same when you get into, and when I saw in my time deep in Christianity, it's like, it's the same thing. Most people are following God's law. Even a lot of, I won't say that. Yeah. Most people are following God's law not because they understand why what is being said may or may not make sense. It's because they're afraid of going to hell.
Yes.
It's not like I want to be an enlightened person who naturally doesn't cause more suffering. Because I love the Buddhist, and you touched on it, the Buddhist mentality of, like, there is no real right or wrong. There's only, are you doing something that, causes suffering? If you are, maybe you shouldn't do it. Why are you doing it?
Yeah.
Because you're only causing suffering.
Right.
It's like the striving towards not increasing suffering.
Yeah.
Like, we have the choice. That's what's beautiful. We can choose.
Absolutely, we do. And
it can be hard. Don't get me wrong. If you're hangry, it's hard to choose correctly sometimes.
If you're in a state of fight or flight in some sense of the word or the phrase, we have less capacity to choose consciously.
Because you're thinking of survival at that
there's
point.
Instinctual patterns. But I wanted to go back real quick. I want to paraphrase what you said about that a lot of people are just doing God's law and not for the reasons of recognizing the oneness between all of us, recognizing that if I hurt you, I'm hurting myself.
Exactly. Yes, dude.
And it's not because you're also the son of God and I'm also the son of God, so I don't want to hurt my family. No, it's that we're literally both God. Yeah. So why would God hurt God?
Exactly.
And I don't even really like using that word, but like that's what we've been using throughout the conversation. So like that, but that's really what it is.
For lack of a better term.
Absolutely. Yeah. And this idea of like God the Father, like, I feel like when that was first uttered, it was probably a poetic, like, I'd be like, yeah, the Father, the archetype, the architect, whatever, the creator. But now it's become so connotated. I cannot stand to hear God be personified as a gender, as a father, as a he.
It's because God
it's not a thing.
Like, it's all things.
Yeah.
There is no gender. There is no sexuality. There is no nothing. It's all things. And we can't fathom it because we are limited.
Exactly.
We are limited.
Yeah.
And that's where, like, once you let go of the identity, then you can really truthfully look at the limitations.
Yeah.
And you can, instead of running away from it, you embrace it. And that's where we're at, I think, in a lot of society, is that we're like rebelling against identities, or we're like so entrenched in identities. It's like if everyone lets go of gender, then you realize, oh, I'm limited. Male is a classification of the body that I have. Or female is a classification of a body someone has.
Right.
There are certain limitations. There are certain biological, physical things that these bodies are capable or not capable of. There's certain strengths each one presents.
And that's just
the
physical.
Union, that's the whole thing with marriage and all that. The union is the coming of two, it's the same all, but it's two limited versions of the all energy coming together and literally creating new life. Like, that's what's so beautiful about it. And like, there's things that I can do that ladies might not be able to do, and there's tons that ladies can do that I sure as hell can't.
Right, like
and natural things,
conceiving a child and
having
giving
a
birth.
kid, exactly. And it's beautiful. You're feeding your kid from your own body.
Yeah.
I can't do that. It's amazing.
Yeah. Well, I'm not prepared to get too deep into the gender talk, but
dude.
no. I want to say that, like, I think what you kind of just like made me realize is that there are like physical classifications, and that's okay. I think where things get challenged, maybe not in the most graceful ways.
I think the word "should" is the problem.
Well, that's always a problem in my opinion.
Yeah.
But in this particular instance, I think what is being challenged is the idea that there are any mental or emotional components to those physical classifications. To be a man, to have a certain type of body, that doesn't actually say anything about who you are on the inside. It doesn't actually say anything about your emotional and mental capacities. So I think that's where, rightfully so, we're challenging that construct of gender. To throw it all out to say that there is no biological component to these classifications is obviously not factually the case. I think it's the emotional and mental, to say if I have a type of body that I need to act a certain way. That's where
Can
we
I
need
paraphrase
to
just
flush
to
that.
like
sure.
make sure, clarify, make
Uh-huh.
sure I'm getting you. I'm pretty sure I do. You're saying that just because like your environmental circumstances are a certain thing doesn't mean you have to conform to the expectation of that. Kind of.
Sure.
Like, it's hard.
Just specifically
I'm
with like
to articulate
having a masculine body, having a man's body, having certain organs is not going
to be male
is not going to necessarily have any.
It doesn't mean you can't give hugs or cry or whatever.
Whatever. It may
the
be.
typical tropes.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's where the challenge is important, and I think we should flush this idea that to be in a certain body means you need to act a certain way. I think that's old school. That's conditioning and not rooted in any sort of truth. It's a habit. It's a generational habit.
Well, and that's what's so hard. We talked about like a lot of people. We've talked about some general things and how like you and I both fully are well aware of that. We can't have this conversation with just any old body.
Yeah.
It's hard, and I think that's the struggle, is that when you're operating at a level where you see above the matrix, so to speak, it can be tough because you almost have to act in a way that the people who aren't aware, like, you have to act in a congruent way where they
you still have to play the game.
It's hard to describe, essentially. And something that's crazy, dude, if you ever look into it, game theory. And it's used across all kinds of domains of study, but it's essentially that everything's a game. We set up games all the time.
Mm-hmm.
We don't stop playing games when we grow up. We play more complicated, intricate games.
Yeah.
And that's it. And you brought it up. And that's what I loved when you said, looking at things like a video game.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, yeah, dude, that's it. Because we level up. Like, you don't even have to spend as much time as on a freaking video game to level up.
Yeah.
You can literally sit and do 5 push-ups a day, and it'll change your life in a month. Like,
Absolutely.
little things like that. And it's what you put your mind to, your focus, your energy, your attention.
Mm-hmm. And to your point, our brains are wired in a certain way to be favorable towards games. There's this book that I read called Super Better. And it's basically a self-help book, but it's explaining how we can use basically game theory to gamify your life, is the way they put it. In ways that you're setting yourself up for quests. And, that gives you dopamine to achieve your ambition or whatever it was, you know? But I'm glad you brought up the game metaphor again, because I wanted to bring it back up too, in the sense of when you were talking about, again, that moment of that, for what I'll call the Christ realization of recognizing that you're the quote unquote son of God, and what that means, this idea of recognizing the divinity within us. Yeah. I would like to liken it to, imagine a character in a game realizes, and I know that's very hard to conceptualize, how could a programmed
it's all good. It's all good. Just go
conceptualize,
on.
But like, whoa, look metaphor. At AI these days. It's pretty wild. Pretty wild. So, you know.
So the character
realizes it's in a game. Okay. So that's what awakening is, right? Yeah. And that doesn't mean the game necessarily gets turned off. It still has to operate within what you call the matrix or the game.
The physical bounds of it.
It can't, you know, so the idea, it thinks, oh, I'm the creator. I created this game, you know? And it's like, yeah, you are intelligence, and intelligence created this game. But intelligence isn't a person, right. You know, and that's where
you're just a piece of that.
Yeah, there is an intelligence. You know, we started this whole conversation. Yeah, but the ocean is what you really are. But we're identified with a single droplet. That's what ego is.
Yeah, we're taking the form of it. It's almost like it's weird to say it, but it's like it's not necessarily wrong to say I am God if someone says that. And I think that's where we run into issues with mental health and different things, because you're having people, whether by accident or on purpose, basically wake up and they have zero support. And in fact, they have persecution for it. And it's hard, like even some of the mystics that I've come across, like talk about when you first waking up, it's kind of like a bull in a china shop. You don't know how to handle. And it's
the energy.
It's akin to like soldiers coming home and reintegrating in society after war. You're in a mode where you're trained to just kill other things or do horribly scary, dangerous shit. And then you come home and you just have to go to the grocery store.
Where the thing that you were doing that was so normal is considered one of the worst things you can do in society.
You're literally
what does that do to a psyche?
Dude, yeah.
Come on. Again, insanity of our fucking society. Yes. You know, and that's why, to your point,
and it's the same in prison systems and all of that jazz. But where
we're locking up people that have...
Those are huge topics.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, trying to think how I want to cap this, but did I fully express the metaphor of the character waking up in the game and realizing that it's in a game?
You had said the character wakes up, it's playing this game, and it wakes up and realizes, holy crap, I'm in a game.
Yeah.
I made the game.
So it doesn't.
But then and that's natural.
Then what? I guess that's the question. Is what's next? You still
realize
play the game.
The limitations.
You're still the character.
Yeah, you still have to play.
You're just not identified with that one story. So that's what
you
I want to say.
recognize there's more than just your game.
Yes.
Because in essence, I think you could almost say like everyone chooses their path, and there is shit that happens that we don't have any control over, like
on this scale. But the designer,
the
intelligence, right?
From in our limited round of playing, if you will.
Yeah.
Like,
and that's what we started this whole conversation with. It was I said that there's design but no designer, and I still stand by that. But also no, there are designers. We're the designers. You know, so it's like
the collective is like the overall designer.
Yeah, it's not.
If there's
it's not
one designer, you could say it's the collective, which is all.
Yeah, exactly.
But then you can't say it's just one, you know, and it's.
But it's both, and that's why non-duality is the field that I resonate with the most, because it's okay with paradox. In our culture, we're not okay with paradox. We want to put things in their categories of right and wrong and this and that, and that's not reality. Reality is both.
And that's a very European neoclassical worldview.
Yeah. And so real quick, what I wanted to say is that this idea, well, I love the way you just put it. I feel that we are in our own game. Each of us is in our own game. And it's not that we need to convince everyone else that my story is the best story.
Exactly.
You know? And so when it comes to Christianity in particular, and this is way too deep of a topic to go into depth, but simply put, while I can appreciate the archetype of Christ and that story, that story arc of the hero's journey that is described throughout the Bible, to me that is just another story. Exactly. I don't consider that the ultimate truth.
Yep.
I consider the ultimate truth that basically all truths are not ultimate. To me, that's basically the ultimate truth. And so there's just the vast void, and there's the light of consciousness rising and falling out of the void. And it's having this journey. It's like, oh, I'm a king's son, and there's suffering in the world. And oh, if I sit long enough, I can feel free of the suffering. You got the Buddha, you know, but then the Buddha dies. He dies of food poisoning. What a non-romantic way to go out. And he's back in the void, you know? And you got Jesus, this little Hebrew son, carpenter's boy, born of a virgin, whatever the fuck that means, you know? Yeah. And then he studies with the Buddha and sits long enough to realize that everything's okay.
Yeah,
you know,
sure.
So to speak. And then he is crucified, and society cuts him down because he talks about these things that he felt, that he felt and that he feels in meditation.
It resonated too hard with them.
To the point,
to where it's like, you're dangerous because you can make people realize we can't run. Yeah. Like you can wake people up that
it's too free.
They don't need to listen to us anymore.
Yeah.
And then we don't have power anymore.
Yeah.
And then we don't have our money anymore.
Yeah.
And then we're nothing. And then our identity's broken.
It's the power struggle.
That's it. Yeah.
And we've illustrated a bunch of power struggles in our own society. And anyway, but my big point here is that like, I think that we're just having dreams. There's just dreams in the void, and those dreams have all sorts of different narratives, and none of them are the one true right one, and it doesn't matter what we do. We're just here to experience within infinity, you know? Yeah, infinity. Exactly. We can't even fathom.
Nope.
So let's have some fucking fun. You know?
Exactly.
Let's not take it so serious, but also recognize that we are one. We don't want to hurt each other. We don't want to hurt ourselves. I mean, even just not even thinking about other people, I still hurt my own self by being unconscious in certain ways in my life, you know? So there are things we can do to clear the flow, to become more clear with what is, to clarify our relationship to our own divine nature. We don't have to personify it, you know? We don't have to other it. That's my problem with a lot of religion, is that it others divinity. It's something outside of ourselves. That's not it.
Yeah.
It's not it. How could it?
Yeah.
How could it be it? How could there be divinity? How could there be God? And then something else? It just doesn't even make logical sense. How could God make something that's not divine?
Right.
That makes no sense.
Yeah. And
that is insane to go through a life feeling that we're separate
fallacy.
from... Yeah, right.
It's that you have a perfect creator, but it made everything imperfect. It's like, what?
And only if we prove our worth can we... It's just, dude, the more you break it down, you're just like, that sounds like a fairy tale that governments told their civilians to keep them docile and scared.
Yeah.
And controllable. It's so hard for me to care too much about that story. But anyway, I'll stop there. But
no, man, it's all, and that's the thing, I speak on it just because I know it so well.
And it's prevalent, so it's worth talking about. A lot of people are in that.
Right.
You know?
And that's where, like, dude, if I could say any advice to, like, people who come from that background or whatever, it's like once you realize the full, I don't even know if you could say it, once you get closer to the full truth.
Yeah, clarify the story.
Then don't try and, like, just do not attempt to tell people about it. Like, if you meet cool people who know, you'll kind of, if you pay attention, you can suss it out.
Yeah, it'll come up naturally.
Like, a lot, the word based gets thrown around. I think it's misused a lot, but it's like...
I'm not even familiar.
Oh, really? People say you're based if you, like, just resonate the truth. Like, you don't even have to say it. You just, like...
Oh, okay.
It's a part of your being almost. I don't know. That's like my ultimate view of it. How I'd love it to be used, but sometimes it's misused. But anyway, like the whole point is like it's tough knowing, and then especially when you're colored by a background, like you can't go back and save the people. It's Plato's cave allegory. It's the perfect thing that most people are sitting in the cave looking at the wall and the shadows on the wall.
And taking that for reality.
And if you're lucky enough to get out of the cave, you have ultimate freedom, which can be a little scary at first, but it's arguably better than being in the cave. But you can't go back in the cave because the cave people will hate you because all they know is the shadows on the wall. You know, it's like, it's such a beautiful, and the thing about it that's even more mind-blowing is it was like, this was back in BC time.
Oh yeah, man. I mean, truth is timeless.
Like, this is forever ago. Ancient people we mistakenly think aren't like we are. They're the same.
Again, our own human arrogance.
Exactly. And so it's just, if you get to that point where you break free, you can't save them. Like, I hate to say it. I was in a point where I thought there was stuff I could do to save them, and now I realize, like, unless I want my life to end prematurely, I can't save them.
And I think the thing is that
I can only just live my game.
Exactly.
And live my truth.
And trust theirs, too. That's where you know, it's only our
They're
own
in the
ignorance.
place that they either need to be, or maybe they just can't go anywhere else. And it's not my job to change that.
They're in the place that they're in, and I can trust that.
Exactly.
Even if it seems like suffering from all current perspectives, eventually the universe is going to unfold far enough for it all to make sense.
And that's what's so hard. And like, even talking to you now, I'm like really realizing it. Like, you in any way interfering with their space like that ends up causing them suffering. Even if what you're doing is quote unquote right, or would lead to a better place, it doesn't matter. If you live by the don't cause suffering, then like, and I have to thank you for that, man, in this conversation, because it's like, now I fully get it. This is why things have struggled more than they needed to, because if you're just trying, don't. If they ask you, that's different, but just
don't impose your truth on other people. It's basically what it comes down to.
Let it ride.
I think it's only from a place of ignorance that we would see any need to wake other people up.
Yeah.
It's a lack of our own trust of what is, you know, and it's identifying with our old ego that was asleep. Oh man, I was having such a bad time there. I should save this person from the bad time.
Right.
That's not it. You got to remember
it's
that they are also you,
yeah.
you know, and they will also get to this place that you're at and beyond and whatever else, you know?
Yeah.
This is existence. This is the divine doing its thing. There's no urgency here. We don't need to wake anything up. Right. Everything's, like one blooming flower in the field doesn't start knocking on the next bloom over like, bro, you got a bloom, bro. Like, it's going to happen on its own.
You're missing it. You're asleep. Yeah, exactly.
No, you're missing it by not enjoying your bloom.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? Yeah. Why are you worrying about other people's process? It's natural, but I think we get to the point where we can, again, forgive the paths, the shadows on the path, forgive all that stuff, have true compassion to acknowledge that we are all on a perfect path, as bumpy and scary and painful as it is perfect.
Yeah. And and the beauty and everything else that comes along with it.
Yeah. Cool. Well, dude, thank you so much for this conversation. I know we got into a bunch of different aspects, but I like to end by asking if there was one thing that you want to highlight about what came up. I think we had a really natural, beautiful conclusion, but if there's anything that you want to highlight, and or if there's anything that you wanted to say that you didn't get a chance to say.
You know, and here we just talk about nothing's urgent. I don't have anything like I need to say, you know.
Cool. I felt very complete in the whole conversation, but you know, that's the way I ended, so I wanted to pose it.
Yeah, anyway, I mean, the one thing I'd say is just, like, I think we wrapped beautifully. Just there's no need to push onto other people. Unless there's an imminent, dangerous threat, there's nothing you have to do about it. Let it be. Let it ride.
Yeah.
And I think it's gonna happen to you where people are gonna put their shit on you, and this is something I'm still working on, finding the way to like be like water and flow around it.
Harmonize with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To walk peacefully with knowing that other people are in that spot, like
right.
the best route walking peacefully, and it just takes time to develop, So.
Totally. Excuse me. Well, I think that's a great way to end it. I guess I'll just leave with the last bit being that I just want to clarify that what you're saying is not to play small. It's not that we don't speak our truth when it's time to speak our truth. It's just that there's not an urgency.
Right.
We don't need to convince anyone of anything. We don't need to prove our worth.
There's no pressure.
There's no pressure.
Yeah.
Of course, if you want to dance, dance. If you want to sing your song. But no one needs to hear it. No one needs to see you dance, but you probably really enjoy it. And if that's your expression, then do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's fun.
Exactly.
And what else are you going to do? You're not going to play your game?
Right.
That sounds awful. To be in a game and not play it.
Yeah, that'd be pretty boring.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, bro.
Cool, man.